Every single action that you have ever taken started as a thought. So when you change the way you think, you will change the way you act, and you will change the way you live. That is hyper-conscious.
No matter what you're going through right now or ever have gone through, the only way your life changes is if you change first. That is what we are here to help you do.
A huge shout out to our friend and mentor, David Meltzer of the Playbook Podcast, for sponsoring this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening? Happy Sunday. Today we have a very special episode for you. We sat down with a relationship counselor. He is a podcaster, over 15 years helping thousands of couples and individuals with their relationships. His name is Pripo Teplitsky. He is the man, very calm. A lot of energetic stuff. A lot of spiritual stuff in this episode. But if you are in a relationship, if you've ever been in a relationship, if you want to be in a relationship, if your relationship isn't as good as you want it to be, he brought a lot of fundamentals, a lot of questions to ask yourself, and a lot of perspectives that have definitely changed Alan and I's view.
Weird analogy, but if you don't know how your car works or how each part in your car works or why it works, you're not going to be able to fix it when it's broken. And I'm not saying that your relationship is broken or ever will be or has been, but I do know that it can improve. And the only way to improve something is to understand it at a deeper level. Pripo Teplitsky is a podcaster who, my girlfriend Emilia, when I first met her, she sent me an episode of his. And it's just absolute fire. He has such a deep understanding of relationships. And I'm so grateful because he taught her so much of what she knows. That's improved my relationship drastically. And she also had him on the Why Power podcast, introduced him to us. Here's what I'll say. Pripo has been in this arena of intimate relationships. He's been married for 25 years. And so not only does he have the success that many of us want in a future happy marriage and happy family, but he also has, like Kevin mentioned, counseled thousands and thousands of people. So at this point, he came on our show and we asked him a bunch of questions. We went super deep. Do not miss this.
Yeah, relationship episodes are always pretty high hitters for us. Out of all the ones we've done, I think Pripo is probably my favorite, just in terms of the energy and talking about it from a spiritual level. It's not just tactics, do this, do this. It's about, like, who do you have to become? How do you have to act? How do you have to look at things? Ownership, all of that stuff. So this is a fire episode. You guys will enjoy it. If you do, like on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcast, share it, all that happy jazz. We love you guys. Happy Sunday. We hope you will enjoy.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyper Conscious Podcast. We have a very special guest today. He is a licensed clinical mental health counselor. He is a podcaster, and he has worked with thousands of couples and individuals over the last 15 years. We are sitting down with the one and only Pripo Teplitsky. How are you doing, my friend?
Man, I feel like I should be running out on a football field right now and bust through something with that intro. Thank you, Kev.
Absolutely. So this was connected. I'll let you do the intro part. I'll let you line it up for us.
So my beautiful girlfriend, Emilia, has a podcast called the Why Power Podcast, and she has been listening to your show for a very long time. As a matter of fact, when we very first started dating about 9 months ago, she sent me an episode where you talked about the importance of spending time in nature. So I listened to the episode where you were on the Why Power Podcast, and we're so excited. So Emilia introduced you and I introduced you to Kevin, and here we are.
Here we are. So let's just hammer right into it. We'll just hammer right into this. Alan and I want to pick your brain on relationships because that is your jam, and you are very good at helping others with those. From your perspective, if somebody walks up to you, Pripo, and says, "Hey, what is the point of an intimate relationship?" From your perspective, what is the point of having a relationship?
It's all about growth, right? It's about growth, learning how to be who we want to be as a person in this world. And I believe we can only do that in relationship. You know, I can sit on top of that mountain and meditate for 40 years and try to get a certain amount of enlightenment. But if I need to come down for that mountain and get into a relationship, I'll read that book instead of the monk's book that's just up there for 40 years. So I think it's a great challenge to find out who we are in regards to how we relate, and we become more of our true selves in relationships.
So if somebody's listening to this right now and they heard challenge, and I'm sure you get this a lot, Alan and I coach, and a lot of people will say, like, you guys, it looks like you guys have really good relationships. I want my relationship to be easy like that. And the first thing I say is, it's not easy. It is the challenge that I want, though. Like, I chose that I want this. How does somebody get rid of that? A relationship is supposed to be quote unquote easy. Like, is that a bad mindset to have? Like, how do you release yourself from that?
I think we got to release that just like life is not easy. We have moments of ease, but we have to effort and we have to do practice. And I remember I was talking to my son the other day, and you guys probably know this as guys who work out. And he said about the routine. I said, what's the best routine to do this with? And he goes, Dad, the routine that you stick with. And so I think that's the work that we do in a relationship, is finding some sweet spots that we know that actually the work through, let's say, conflict. When we have conflict, it's there for understanding. And people that don't do conflict well, that's why they avoid it. But if you do conflict well, you'll get through it. It's not painless. It has its scrapes and bruises, but you will get more understanding and go to a deeper level of connection. And so it's up to people if they want a deeper level of connection and doing the work. And it's a practice. It is a daily focus, a daily intention, and a practice. And it can become more graceful, which is more ease, but it's not going to be all of that. I've been married 25 years, and that is a practice. I love it. I love the progression of it.
So that leads me to a question, which is, obviously you've learned so much about yourself, so much about people in your own marriage and in your own practice. So 25 years of marriage, that sounds like it's rare. That's a rare, beautiful thing. What have you learned, if you could pick a couple golden nuggets from your marriage that you think would help someone who was young and early in their relationships, like Kevin and myself? So you've been with Taryn about 1.5 years, and I've been with Emilia almost a year now, probably almost 10 months now, rather. What would you tell us as young men that you've learned from 25 years of marriage? I remember one lesson I learned was, I wish for you everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. That was one kind of golden nugget of like, keep the major things major. What would you tell us and our listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a word that we don't use very often, and that's cherish. And in order to cherish something, you have to really take care of it mindfully. So one way is to be aware and to observe, and to do that with an appreciative focus. There are so many times, I think, in our relationships that we get into this rut that we think about what's lacking or what we don't like. And we, as human beings, we have a negative bias. We take negativity like Velcro and positivity like Teflon, right? So we have to inundate the positivity. So for me, what my focus has been over the years is to really understand the practice of appreciation, a deep level of appreciation. Because as we know as human beings, this journey, this story can end any moment. One of us can get hit by a bus. And I know that that's a cliche in some way, but if we really keep it close to us, knowing that this might be the last encounter that I have with this person that I'm sharing my life with, how do I want to show up? So for me, it's putting in the intention of the partner that I want to be with a deep level of appreciation. And it is juicy when we do that.
Have you always been like this in terms of so conscious about relationships? What got you into this field? Like, did you decide you wanted to help people? Did you have an experience early on? How did this Pripo come to be?
Wow. Well, I had a past life, as we say it. You know, I was a corporate executive for many years. But I would say it stems before that. My parents were divorced when I was about 12, 13. I decided a year or two later to go and live with my father, who was a single father at the time. And in the 70s, that was pretty rare. And I remember him saying this when I moved in, and he said, there's 3 things to our relationship: communication, communication, communication. And that's pretty rare for a man to say that to his son. And I just experienced from him, one thing I want to say that's important about that, every man in my family that I grew up with, my grandfathers, my uncles, my father, my stepfather, they never raised their voice to me. They never laid a violent hand. They said, I love you to me every day. They kissed me in every opportunity. So I'm really fortunate to feel safe around men. And so I think that aspect of safety in my friendships with men, and the deeper level was actually when I quit my corporate job when I was about 30-ish and wanted to find more purposeful meaning. How could I really give more of myself and actually allow emotions to be in my day? That's very difficult to do as a corporate executive. So I went to a place called Esalen Institute, which is out in Big Sur, California. It's a human potential learning center. And I would go there periodically over the few years before I quit my job to take weekend workshops and meditation and other things. So I went there for 2 months, and I was in a 2-month workshop. And my roommate at the time, of about 125 people, was a woman. That mattered to me, mattered to her. We were the only man and woman placed in a single room with 2 single beds. And we've been living together from that day, from the first day we met. That's my wife. The very first day we met, we lived together for 25 years.
Wow.
So, that's pretty rare. When I have clients tell me, hey, it's been 6 months, should we move in together? I'm like, hey, I'm not the guy to ask. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So we, with the learning tools of Esalen, there was establishment of what's called Gestalt therapy, which is a here and now therapy that the Esalen Institute was established by Fritz Perls, and a lot of the other communication tools. We had from our foundation a very deep understanding, and I would say more authentic way of being in a relationship. So that I ended up living there about 1.5 years with my wife, and that really springboarded us to a whole different level, and my consciousness. And so I think that was the big shift when I was about 30-ish, and I'm 57 now. Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
That'll do it for sure.
Yeah.
So Pripo, I've been saying something to people, and I think that success in our life, and I don't mean success just financially or in a way that certain people, the narrow view of success, but like a fulfilling life, comes down to a couple really important distinctions. I think it's important to understand your mission. In other words, what do you want to bring to the world? What can your gifts and talents bring to the world to where you can be of service to others? I think one of them is understanding your core values. In other words, what is most important to you in terms of family, friendship, and then what that means to you, and then also your core beliefs. What do you believe? And so what I think is true is whether it's a business partnership or an intimate relationship, I think the root cause of many conflicts that are macro, like chronic conflicts that keep happening, right, are goals in conflict, mission in conflict, core values in conflict, or beliefs in conflict. What is your perspective on that? Because if we can understand the root cause of a conflict at a deeper level, we'll be able to resolve it and make better decisions.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alan. I just like to look at conflict is the reason for conflict, again, is for understanding. And that is why conflict is there. And again, if people have a challenge about conflict, they're going to avoid it. They're not, if we don't know how to do the repair, if we don't know how to be curious and interested in another perspective, if we get away from the biggest addiction that I believe us human beings have, and that's the addiction to being right. If we get away from that and be curious and open to different perspectives, that we can acknowledge and validate another person's perspective, which doesn't mean that we agree with it. We don't have to agree with a perspective to try to understand it. Then I think conflict can really shift. And I like to look at conflict, instead of conflict resolution, I like to look at it as conflict transformation. Because if we're just going to resolve an issue, a lot of businesses, they go straight to resolution. Once you resolve something, it's now what's the next checklist to resolve? And you might forget or not look at, what about a transformational process? During that period, did somebody sincerely apologize with remorse? Did I get a sincere acknowledgement? That could be the transformational process in the conflict that's needed for growth. So I think that we have to understand, like you said, our purpose, our belief system. A belief system is just a thought we think over and over again. We want to change a belief system. We get to think of another thought and think that over and over again and see where that lies. So I would just say is like making, one part that you asked about relationship, my 25-year marriage, one part about that too with conflict is making room for each other. Making room for, this is your experience, this is my experience, and then we have a relational experience. What's our story? Let's be curious about our story. Hopefully we can make it a good one.
What does making room look like? Like, can you give us an example of something that might come up where you might have to take a step back and do that?
Yeah, I think when I know when I recognize I'm being defensive and I'm trying to move a point and I'm not making room for my wife's experience or something that she might need, I'm not being curious and interested. Definitely that's not making room for her perspective. If I believe that is only one direction that will help solve this issue, that's not making room. I also think that we have to make room within ourselves. So that means that I have to self-soothe. I have to decrease my anxiety so that I can actually hear what's going on, right? When I'm jacked, when I'm hijacked, I can't hear. Physically, that's what happens, right? Limbic system gets kicked in, blood flow to the neocortex. Blood flow does not go to the neocortex, which is your rational thinking part of the brain. So I actually have to make room for myself to be grounded in order to be present in a relationship. So the practice of being present, we have to do on our own. Whatever practice we have, whether it's through meditation or other things that we do, to be able to be really authentically present, to be able to make room, especially for something that we don't agree with or that we don't like.
You mentioned understanding several times. And this is a question that I love to ask people who have been in a specific arena for a long time. Again, you've learned about thousands of relationships at this point, and so you obviously have a unique perspective on some of the common conflicts and misunderstandings. So my question for you is, what are some of the most common misunderstandings in relationships that you think cause, toxic challenges or challenges that don't get transcended or transformed?
Well, I think that the toxic part is around when differences become resentment, and because resentment gets fermented, and then we don't have the openness, we don't have the intention to come out of our hurt shell and take the risk to trust again. So I think a lot of times when couples get to that point, there's this lack of trust or safety. They don't want to come out, because if they do come out and they get hurt again, then that's another layer that they can put out. Instead of being able to communicate that challenge that they have of lack of safety or the resentments. One big thing that I see couples have a really hard time with, and that is a deep, heartfelt, remorseful apology. I hear these apologies. Oh, I apologized. I said, oh, tell me about your apology. I said, I'm sorry. What does she want from me? I said, I'm sorry. I'm like, well, there's a little bit more to it than saying I'm sorry. That's taking ownership of the behavior without defending and explaining it at all. It's being empathetic to what you believe your partner experienced, to asking if you can change. But the most part of it is feeling the remorse. It's hard to feel remorse because at times we might feel shame. And if we feel shame at that time, we're not going to take accountability and responsibility because it's too painful to feel that, because shame is very painful. So we have to have more self-compassion to walk our ladder up, to be able to, guilt is fine, to feel guilt. That's a good emotion to springboard to change behavior. But what I see, people have a hard time dealing with, let's say, shame on a deep level, because then that means I'm flawed instead of my behavior. There's something wrong with my behavior instead of there's something wrong with me.
Right. So how do you, if somebody's watching this or listening, taking ownership might create shame or guilt. How do we help them either avoid that or change their relationship with that? Because I know Alan and I always say, like, it's our fault. Like, I made you feel that way. It's my fault. It's my fault. I should have done better. But it's taken a long time and a fairly thick skin, and also an understanding that this is actually important for the future. And it still sucks. Like, I still cry when I hurt my girlfriend, right? How do you build that level of accountability if you've never done it before?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line of being able to take accountability for my behavior and know that I influence somebody's emotion. I'm not responsible for it. We do have the saying that I made you feel bad. I didn't make the person feel bad. I influence for them to, in some level, decide to feel bad. It's not like I'm disowning responsibility, but I have to know where my stuff is and ends and your stuff begins. So I think that that's an important part, because a lot of times people take the shame such at a deep level because they see how they affect that person on an adverse level. And sometimes it's the other person that has some of the stuff to work out. For instance, if I do something that my partner, if she gets disappointed, boy, when she's disappointed, I activate with anxiety, right? And I get up. Most of the time, what we do is I'm going to try to make her feel better and really apologize. I'm sorry, or do anything in order to bring her down. But the real reason to bring her down is so I'll come down, right? So instead, what we call is differentiation. Differentiation is she gets jacked, I get jacked. I need to bypass her and self-soothe myself so I can witness her experience. If I can just witness her experience, Kevin, that's what room is, right? Making room is allow her to have her disappointment, not try to change it so fast because I feel shame about it. Let her say it. Let her talk about it. Let her tell me how much that she's going through and how I affected her. If I can make that room, then I'm working on my shame.
So I have a saying that I've been saying for many years now: the suppression of self-expression leads to depression. I think so much of what we do is a form of self-expression, right? The way we dress, the way we talk, the art that we like. And so I think what happens is when fear comes in because we got hurt, and you mentioned like kind of shelling up, we have trouble expressing our truth because we got hurt last time we did. So what is your perspective on self-suppression, and how can someone who's out there who maybe has been hurt, I always go back to an experience I had in high school where I asked a dumb question and one of the really popular kids got the whole class laughing at me. And fortunately, my teacher, Mrs. Pryor, defended me and said he's, asking a question because he wants to learn, and bad questions lead to good ones. And by the way, the bully got a worse grade on the AP test, right? So it's just fascinating. And if she didn't defend me, would I have suppressed from then on? Would I have not asked a question in the future? So I feel like we all have these experiences where we got hurt because we expressed our truth, because someone else was trying to be right instead of understanding. What do we do? How do we identify that we are self-suppressed? And then what do we start to do to uncage ourselves from that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because we do have to identify when we're not flowing in our authenticity, when we don't feel comfortable to be able to say something, and also maybe not be received, in some way even be rejected. So we have to recognize, are we continually suppressing our authentic voice because somebody else doesn't agree with it, or we do get ridiculed for it? So one is being able to stand up and put a boundary around that, to even be able to, if somebody interrupts, to be able to put a boundary and say, wait, I'm not finished speaking, or I'm going to speak for about 3 minutes and I don't want you to interrupt at all. After the 3 minutes, I'll tell you when I'm finished. Then you can ask questions. So I can create a safe container by saying what I want. I can even say, hey, right now I don't want any advice after I speak. You can give that to me later on. You can ask when I'm open. Right now, I just want you to listen. I just want you to reflect back what you heard. Because I think that's really important. To really be heard is what a lot of human beings want. I hear that all the time in my counseling practice. That was one of the questions earlier. I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen. We have to ask for it at times. And I think that that's, really vital. Is what does that mean? There's this kind of back and forth that we go, I hear you. I hear you. That's a great, sentence to say to somebody, but are you really hearing? When that happens to me, and that happened to me in the past, somebody said, I hear you, Pripo. I hear you. I said, really? Tell me what you heard. They said, well, you think I'm an asshole. I'm like, no, I said that I was angry.
Right.
You didn't hear me. You didn't hear me.
Right.
Right. So it's like that lets me know, so now reflect it back. So I think like being able to ask for that is so important, to be able to, again, know that this is what I need to feel safe. And another part, Alan, is to be able to, I call it speak your truth and find your truth as you're speaking. I might not know what my truth is until I'm hearing myself, and I start to hear myself, and I'm like, ooh, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer. But I can only do that when I have that room to do that. So that's why I think at times it's really good for one person to just speak and the other one to just listen. You can make that a rule. Put a little timer on. I'm going to speak for about 5 minutes, and I might even pause for 2 minutes to try to let my authentic truth come up. So I think suppression happens when we've been overridden, we've been interrupted, we've been shamed, and we internalize that. And one part of turnaround shame is self-appreciation and self-compassion.
Wow.
Yeah, this is deep.
Yeah.
I love this. I'm very much from what you're saying is if you're in a relationship with somebody who isn't willing to be as committed to this, what do you do? Like, how do you bring this up? And Alan and I are both blessed because we have amazing women in our lives who love this.
Yeah.
But like, if
We're
I go,
honestly better at this than we are.
oh, they're way better.
Yeah.
If I say I go home,
Fortunately.
say I go home after listening to this and I say, okay, these guys had this guy on Pripo and he was like, we have to talk about this and like, I just need a little space, and the person isn't receptive. Like, what is the process of bringing that up? Because I listened to your episode on changing your partner, which was fire, absolute fire. And obviously, like, there are certain things that aren't really changing them. It's actually like, where do you draw that line? I know that's a 12-part question, Pripo, but I'm curious.
No, it's a great question, Kev. I think one part of it is to be able to be known. I think that's more important than whether somebody gets it or not. You know, if I know that I send it out in my alignment, I call it, right? I always tell people, you can't be concerned how somebody receives it. I have no control over how you receive it. I have control of how I send it out. So am I sending out my truth in my own alignment? That might be with truth, with authenticity, with compassion, with presence. If I send it out to you and you take it and receive it adversely, I got to take a quick mirror back to myself. Did I send it out in alignment? Okay, I did. I got to let you have your experience. I can't try to change that, but I can let you be known about you not receiving me of how that feels. That's the only thing I can do. If I say, hey, I'm just putting this out to you, and right now what I experience is that you're raising your voice and you're interrupting. And when that happens, I feel I want to shut down and I don't feel safe around you. I just need to tell you that. I got to let that person respond from that. And if they're not self-regulating in some way, maybe they had a bad day, I can try it again. But after a while, I have to decide, is this the kind of safe relationship that I want to play with? And what I mean by play with, it's play. You know, this is a lifetime, like we're playing back and forth. When I was a kid, if I didn't enjoy how we were playing, I stopped playing. I found somebody else to play with. And I'm not saying to automatically jump to a different relationship, but it's that kind of aspect of like, are we bringing ourselves to this encounter? And one way to do that is to be able to take the time to know what it is that you want and tell the other person what it is that you want, not what you don't want, right? You don't want to say, don't yell at me right now. You want to say, talk to me in a lower voice. The mind goes to where it pictures. If I say, don't yell at me, we're both already picturing yelling with the big X. The body doesn't see the X. If I say, talk to me in a lower voice, the mind has to go there. So if I'm telling my partner, I want you to be received in this way, are you able to just make some room for me? Instead of, you never give me any time, you don't understand me. I'm going to just get defensiveness from that.
Can I follow up real quick?
Yeah, man.
So you said that maybe it might not necessarily be the time to go find somebody else to play with. How do you know, and this is one of my favorite questions that anytime we do interviews with relationship experts, how do you know when it's time to break up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have that a lot. I haven't done a podcast on this yet, but I am going to do one. And I think from my experience is that it's a body sensation. It's a sense. It's a knowing. You know, we can list all these pros and cons, but it's more than a rational aspect. It's a knowing. And usually that knowing is in the energetic solar plexus. You know, we know when it's a yes. We know when we want to do something. We also know if we put something out and if we say the word no, our body contracts in that area. So I remember years ago when I was in a relationship and I would sit, try to calm myself and I say, should I stay in this relationship? And I said the word yes. And I felt contraction. Then I would say the word no. And I felt some relief. My body knew, but it took me 6 months to make that decision. It doesn't mean that I'm going to follow it right through, but the body knows because the body is what holds all that emotion in. So I would tell people to get more aware with your body. Some people call it intuition, but it's a sensation.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alan here. I hate to interrupt the one and only Pripo Teplitsky, but I had to jump in here and tell you about our upcoming mastermind with Mr. John Laurito. John Laurito is a leadership expert. He has a podcast called Tomorrow's Leader, and he is going to be joining us on Monday, August 10th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're listening to this right now, it is Sunday. So tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, be there. I've talked about this before. If you do not consider yourself a leader, you're simply wrong. Why? Because leadership is influence, and whether you know it or not, or like it or not, you influence those around you. Leadership is so critical. I'm coming with my questions prepared. I very much encourage you to do the same. John Laurito has spent more than 2.5 decades in the financial services industry. He knows all things leadership. Come, ask questions, eager to learn, just like myself, just like Kevin, just like Amy, and just like Tiff. The Hyperconscious team will be there. Network with like-minded people. It's going to be awesome. Again, if you want the Zoom link and password, you can reach out to myself, Kevin, Amy, or Tiffany. All the contact information is in the show notes below this episode. Reach out, get the Zoom link and password, mark your calendar, and we will see you there. Talk to you soon. So I think the body holds emotion and energy. A lot of people have described emotion as energy in motion.
Yes.
And I often tell this story about how I watched a specific movie. I think it was called The Glass House with Woody Harrelson. And at the end of it, I had like this overwhelming, convulsing, crying experience for like 10 minutes, something crazy, like a really long time. And yeah, there was a little bit of a what I would refer to as an emotional hangover after that. But then after that, I felt freer. I felt more at peace inside me. And I feel like I released some of that stuff that I didn't even know was there. And so the suppression of self-expression causes problems, leads to depression. Sometimes we don't even know when we're suppressing. We try to look someone in the eyes and we look away because we're afraid. We're afraid they're going to see what's inside of us that we've been holding on to. How do we identify when we're living in fear? And how do we release that stuff and free ourselves from our own fear when we're not even sure why it's there, or maybe we can't remember the traumas we've been through?
Great question. Yeah, you used two words that I would like to put together, and that's emotional release. I used to be also a body worker for many years. I learned at Esalen Institute, and we have this terminology called emotional release. And that means that the body holds, it takes it in. That means that maybe I have a traumatic event or an experience, and the body says in subtle ways, okay, Pripo, hey man, I'm going to go ahead and take this and bury this for you right now, but you got to get to it. Because just think of it, if you experienced all the traumatic experiences of your whole lifetime in this one moment, you'd disintegrate. You can't feel it all. So the body hides it away, but it does it in the way of just to be able to function and survive. Right. But we forget about getting to it and then releasing it.
Right.
You know, you might hear these stories about animals that the prey, when it gets away from a predator, one of the first things that it does when it gets away, it shakes its body. And so it shakes the trauma of the experience from the body so it doesn't stick into the muscles and the cells and the bones of the body. We human beings say that all the time, but we don't do it. Shake it off, brother. Shake it off. But do you really shake it off? One of the best things to do is actually shake the body, make a sound, because when you do that, go ahead, brother. Go ahead, do that. Do you feel a little tingle going right now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, that's that now the energy in the hose that all of a sudden got some clarity. And so now we're getting a flow. So we need to do things like that physically, move it. We have to also register. I like to register when I'm standing in line. All right, people, I'm a little impatient. Here's my practice. How's my body? Where am I holding? I'm a buttocks holder. All right. And let me release that butt a little bit. Let me release that shoulders. Great. 20 seconds later, let me check it again. Wow, it just creeped up, right? Because it's automatic in some way. It's unconscious. So I think that we have to work through the body in a conscious way, shaking some things off. Maybe at the end of the day, even going through the end of the day, what did I experience that was traumatic and I didn't get understanding about it?
Wow.
How do I need to release it? Sometimes the release is even speaking to the person that I might have had that conflict with and just let them know that I experienced some sadness, I experienced some anger, some feelings of resentment, and I just want them to know because I want to clear that energy between us.
I have so many questions running through my head. What are some of the common themes for people that come into your office, couples? Like, you know, is it the cell phone? Like, oh, he's always on a cell phone, not giving me attention. Like, what are some of the common themes when people come in where you're like, oh, okay, I've seen this 1,000 times before. Like this is what I advise.
Yeah, well, that's a symptom of not having presence, and that's a symptom of them not feeling seen and heard. So the big one is not feeling seen and heard. Another one is we don't communicate well. And I get that. I understand. However, in my experience of a counselor and in my own marriage, I really believe that people want to communicate so that they'll connect. I have a different viewpoint. I believe that people actually need to connect in order to communicate.
Interesting.
If I'm not connected with somebody, I could say the most nonviolent vocabulary and it could be off. But if I'm connected, I could say stupid shit and we're fine. So it's basically understanding what is connection. And for some people, I believe it's around positive regard and appreciation. If I'm thinking positive, appreciative thoughts about my partner, even when I'm not with her, that flow and that connection that I have within myself is going to carry to when I see her, and it's going to carry my words. Vice versa happens, right? If I'm thinking judgmental thoughts, resentful thoughts, that's going to carry my connection and therefore my communication. So I would say, and I work with couples, how do you create connection? And what is connection? And do you feel connected? Are you being present with each other? That's a huge aspect of connection. One 30-second episode of connection can override hours of disconnection.
Wow. So I'll tell a brief story here. I used to have allergies, and Kevin's heard this before.
Yeah,
He's
I was going to say,
here we go.
Pripo, take as long as you want to drink that water.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't heard it though.
Brief story, 7 minutes later. So I used to have allergies, and I used to get allergy shots, which is basically they would inject me with the allergen to get my central nervous system and immune system to kind of soothe to that. And it never worked for me. Eventually, I went up to New Hampshire. I forget the name of the clinic, but they had signals from a computer that would go into my central nervous system. And now I understand kind of how this works because I've studied the neuroscience and all that. But what they would do is they would give me a signal for dust mites to my central nervous system and then simultaneously take this little massager and like stimulate my spine. And they would do it over and over and over again. And eventually I don't have any allergies anymore. I went through, and it was very fascinating because I don't think we understand that all things are energy and that our central nervous system is responding to the energy of the rooms we're in. And I remember listening to you on the Y Power podcast, and you said that intentional energy always supersedes unintentional energy.
Yeah, it overrides.
Overrides.
Yeah.
I have two questions for you. One, what is your understanding of positive associations with your central nervous system, sort of like stimulating my spine, getting my immune system to stop overreacting to dust mites that aren't actually dangerous, right? An allergy, in terms of the context of intimate relationships. And then number two, can you tell our listeners kind of what you told the Y Power podcast listeners of like how intentional energy overrides unintentional energy and your perspective on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's very much that part of it. If I am focusing on something that I don't want, again, I just want to say like that picture is there, and we need to focus on what it is that I do want. So I think that part that overrides, I'm going to just start with that one. The part that overrides is I get to see what the viewpoint and perspective is. If and especially coming from me, I can't control an environment. I can only control how I respond to my environment. And so if, let's say in partnership, I need to focus on what kind of partner that I want to be, not what kind of partner that I want, because I have no control over that. Me being the kind of partner I want to be is going to inspire my partner to be the kind of partner that they want to be. That's the influence that I have. So what I think is important that people don't get is they think, yeah, I'm focusing on compassion or I'm focusing on patience. I'm like, you have to do that in detail. What is Pripo being a patient partner look like? That means when I walk through the door and my wife is busy with sewing, or she's talking to her sister and sewing these incredible clothes that she makes, or she's talking to her sister from Denmark, I'm not going to get the attention that I think I want. I need to put down my shit, go play with the cat, go out on the balcony. That's Pripo being a patient partner. If I see myself do that over and over and over again, that's how I can visualize me being the characteristics and those value systems that I want to be. So I have to do it in detail. So that's what I mean by overrides. There's things that I do. I have a 50-minute commute from my office to home. I purge my day. I used to just turn off the car in the driveway and get out, and whatever energy was in the house, I would react to. Years ago, I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off the car, and I'm going to sit in the driveway, and I'm going to just breathe. And I'm going to think about, all right, people, you're going to just walk into that house that has two people that's very, very important in your life, more important than any conversation that you also had today. How do you want to be when you walk through that door? So when I have that vision, I can move past any energy that's coming by me because I have the intentionality to want to connect. So that's one. Mm-hmm. Another part is how we influence each other. For instance, I tell the story on my podcast. There was years ago, my wife and I got into a conflict. I walked outside on the balcony. I said some sarcastic stuff through the screen door, and she responded back, "What, love?" And I thought to myself, how the hell did she come back to love that fast? I want to be able to do that. So she didn't say, you need to come back to love. She just did it. Her being that inspiration to me wanted me to shift and change. So in intimate relationships, we're a system. When one part of the system shifts, the system has to shift. In what direction? I have no idea, but it's got to shift. So it might as well be the part that you have influence on. And so what's so important about that is I need to focus on a different response to what it is that I don't like instead of focusing on what I don't like, right?
Interesting.
Whatever response that I give, I'm going to get a different response. If my wife says something stupid to me and I say something stupid back, I'm going to get a certain response. She says something hurtful, which she rarely does. I'm really fortunate, guys. I would just like to put that out too. And I'll respond, ooh, wow, that hurt. I'm going to get a different response back. So I have influence on the response that I get back based on, again, how I respond to a situation. That's also what I mean by overriding some intentional energy.
Wow. I'm gonna have to listen to this episode multiple times.
Right.
For sure. There's so much value here. You seem extremely well versed when it comes to relationships, your own consciousness, your own awareness. From your perspective, if you'd be vulnerable with us, what is your biggest strength when it comes to your relationship, and what is your biggest weakness?
My biggest strength is appreciation. I studied it in my graduate program about 15 years or so ago, and I wanted to really implement it in my family and really see the shifts. And I saw how it is, in my experience as a counselor and in my own relationship, the number one thing that will shift a relationship tenfold. And I'm talking about sincere, heartfelt, consistent, a practice of deep felt appreciation, whether it's verbalized, whether it's felt. There's a system that happens, especially with couples and families, that you start to sync. I call it the couple bubble. It's a physical electromagnetic field that actually starts to be created. So I just saw the power of that. And it came to, when I think about my death, and I think about that often, I think about, again, how do I want to be in a situation if all of a sudden this person's not with me or I'm not with it? To me, it brings preciousness of life right to the forefront. It's not morbid. It helps me show up. I want my legacy to be that people around me felt appreciated by me. It's very dear to me to want that. So I think that's a strength of mine. I would say that probably, which I'm working on, is part of that addiction to being right. I like to be right. My wife would say, I love to be right. And the hard part about it, guys, is like most of the time I'm freaking right. So it's kind of like, how could you not be attached to that? But my wife would say, why can't I just be right? I'd say, honey, because you're not right. And she's like, can't you just give it to me? And so we would play with it. And I would catch myself coming and say, honey, it was Tuesday, not Wednesday. And then I would catch and I say, honey, you just might be right. And she's like, oh, that feels so good. So basically, right. It's like, do you want to be happy? Do you want to be married? Do you want to be, all of that is that I learned is my part of being able to like let go of that.
Powerful.
Super powerful. I love how the ego version of you just came right up, but I'm usually right. It's hilarious. It's like we all have it inside of us. It's just
I a quick story that happened that really opened my mind to this. I was taking a shower one day. My wife and son took a shower before me, turned it on, no hot water. Bummed, right? So I went downstairs to the hot water tank, saw that it was working, went back up, turned it on to hot water. No hot water. It was all cold. Really frustrated. I said to my wife, what'd you do? And she's like, we just took a regular shower. And so I said, look, I'm going to go back down. You tell me if there's hot water. So I went downstairs. I said, turn it on. She turned it on. She said, yes, there's hot water. I come back up. I go turn it on. No hot water. Really frustrated going on. And then finally I went to turn it again. And I looked at myself. I was turning on the cold water faucet the whole freaking time. And I remember looking at her going, I fixed it, babe. I got it. Right? You know, that feeling of malice, shame, and that. See, I got it.
Yeah, right.
She said, what went on? And I'm like, I told her what happened. We had a great laugh. From then on, I thought, man, I am never going to think how sure that I'm so right. I was sure that I was turning on the hot water tank, right? Hot water faucet.
I do that with my girlfriend all the time. She said, Kev, you shouldn't put all of that wet laundry into the dryer. It won't dry. And I take it out and I start folding it, and I'm like, babe, I wish you would have told me not to put all this in here because it's still soaking wet. And then we had a good laugh over it. It was good, but yeah.
Oh, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. Do you want to be in love or do you want to be right?
Yeah.
It's powerful. So we've got 7 minutes on the clock here, and I'm trying to think to myself, like, okay, what else can we talk about? And I want to understand your perspective on something that I learned, because I want to make sure that my understanding of it is as accurate as possible. I want your perspective so we can see a 360-degree view of it.
Yeah.
So I read in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. I forget the name of the study. I wish I remembered it, but they and I'm sure you've heard of this. They looked at a married couple for 30 seconds on video, and they predicted with a very high % accuracy whether or not they'd be together or divorced in 10 years, and then they followed up. And what they looked for was, I believe, resentment, signs of resentment, and one other thing. It might have been guilt. Maybe you know this better than me. Can you explain to Kevin, myself, and our listeners how they were able to predict that, and then what we can do to try to catch those things early so that we don't end up, divorced later in life or upset and with regret?
Yeah. I believe that was off of John Gottman's lab research that he does, that study came from, and it's predicted, I believe that the percentage was around predicting 97% of couples after 9 years he could predict whether they were going to stay together or not. And it was based on one of the biggest poisons was contempt.
Right.
And contempt is when I'm right, you're wrong, or usually it comes in the form of disgust. That means rolling of the eyes, looking away. That was the biggest poison. The other ones are criticism, blame, and defensiveness. He calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So it's basically those 4 things. When you have those in your relationship to a certain degree, and we all have them in some way.
Right.
But if it's a mainstay in a relationship, that's going to be the demise of the relationship. So I think people have a hard time catching their own contempt or their own defensiveness. We're really good at catching our partners.
Right.
And so one is really being able to study ourselves and be curious about ourselves. And the challenge goes back to the shame. My inner critic can go, damn, you did that again. You were so defensive. If I don't have a loving, like we call it the loving parent voice in my head instead of the critical parent voice, and be curious, wow, people, why did I do that again? Why was I defensive? As opposed to, shit, why am I doing that again? That I'm being critical myself, and that's going to exacerbate the shame. So I would just say to that is that we have to recognize ourselves. Am I being critical? Am I being defensive? Am I blaming? Am I being contemptuous? And critical is, I don't believe that there's constructive criticism. I believe that we can have complaints, and complaint is going after the behavior. Criticism is going after the personhood. You're lazy. You're irresponsible. That's criticism, as opposed to, you said that you were going to pick me up at 7 o'clock and you showed up at 8. I feel really betrayed by that because I was counting on you. That's a complaint. So it's changing the focus of those things in a relationship and see how much it is. And a lot of times when couples are on the brink of breaking up, there's a high level of those four things.
Yeah, I think if we all check on our own experience, that's powerful. Go ahead.
For sure. I was going to say, Alan, myself, and our significant others, respective significant others, we have our systems that we rely on to make sure that we're the best versions of ourselves. We have our weekly check-ins, our nightly gratitudes, and that sort of thing. What do you and your wife have in place, and what do you suggest for your clients? Do you suggest that they have one?
Yeah. I call it an appreciation heart share. And a heart share is where one person speaks and the other one listens. I like to start off with 10 minutes. You just put a timer on, and we just pour through the deep love of appreciation. Sometimes we're talking about a behavior. Most of the time, we really just talk about the value and the character of who we are. But we do it in specifics. So that is, the more specific that you get in an appreciation, saying the behavior, saying how it affects you, what's going on in the sensation in the body, and to be able to express that out. So there's times where my wife and I, we do 20 to 30 minutes a piece. And so we might do a whole hour of appreciation, a couple of every other week.
How often? Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do it probably every other week. There was a time where we were doing it more weekly when maybe we had some challenges going on early on in our relationship, or when there are challenges. We also like to go for a walk. We do that really well. When we're in a conflict, one thing that we do is we call for going for a walk. We live in a beautiful wooded area. And one of us, will start walking, and one of us starts putting out that pinky truce, put it out there, and the other one grabs it. We just hold our hands so that our body starts to sink in before we start to talk.
Powerful.
And I think that that's a great metaphor. When I'm walking with my wife, we are in a forward motion. So we're going forward in our relationship. We're looking at the same view, and we're connecting by holding hands. I can't get angry when I'm walking with my wife and holding hands. I can get angry when I stop walking, let go of her hand, and look at her and start getting angry. I can't walk and get angry at the same time. So we use that tactic when we want to move through. But a lot of it is just, it just really also comes down to kindness. That's where the cherishing part is to be really kind, and it has nothing to do with nice. Kind comes from a deep level of appreciation and soft grace, and the do things and see things from that kind energy and gesture. That's loving. Love is a verb. We have to water the relationship just like we water all the plants around us.
My goodness.
This has been unbelievable.
My goodness. So you survived the hyperconscious gauntlet. I think you are way more hyperconscious than we are, so I think you ran the gauntlet today. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they listen to your podcast, which I highly recommend? Where can they find you on social media? Where can they find your website? Where can they get coached by you? Plug away, my friend.
Yeah. First of all, great questions, guys. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
Guys got it on the ball, and wonderful podcast. And I'm so glad that you're out there giving this consciousness to people to look at.
Thank you so much.
I have a podcast that's been out for 2 years. Going on 100, and I think I just recorded 106 episodes weekly. It's called Relationships. Let's Talk About It. It's on all the platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, all of them. And you can find me on Instagram at Pripo Teplitsky. That's Pripo, the Pripo, not Pre, Pripo. And Teplitsky. That's a heck of a name. I'll put that out. And I have a website called heartsharecounseling.com. And probably next month, I'm going to be putting out guided meditations and guided visualizations, whether it's around what we talked about, visualizing ourselves as a partner, how to deal with anxiety. I've been told that I have clients that say, people, don't get offended, but I listen to your podcast just so I can fall asleep. I love your voice. It's soothing. So then they said, do you have any sleep-inducing meditations? I'm like, well, I'll record one. So I'm doing things like that. Appreciation, heart share preps for couples. So there would be, it's going to be on the platform called Relationships. Let's Learn About It on my website, which I will then also have some online courses around appreciation for couples, apologies for couples, many different courses that people can take individually and as a couple, and that should be coming out in the next few months.
My goodness.
So I just want to let all of our listeners know that, so when I first got with Emilia, not only did she share your podcast with me, and it was about nature, but I can tell, and I told her right out of the gate, I said, maybe, I said, I know we met for a reason, and I can feel it, and I think that you're going to help me grow internally, and I think I'm going to help you succeed externally. And I think that that's really what's happening. I think I kind of understand, top leverage points, tasks, self-discipline, how to scale and grow your business, stuff like that. For me, the growth is inward. And here's what I'll say. There have been moments in my relationship where I said, I'm going to defer to you, to Emilia. And I've done that several times whenever I felt lost and I felt like I couldn't grab the reins and help us out in this circumstance. And here's what I'll tell you. I know that she learned so much from you and from your show. Mm-hmm. So for anyone listening right now, if you're having trouble in your intimate relationship, Kevin and I can definitely help you. And I want you to listen to this episode for sure. But your podcast is absolute fire. I've witnessed it change my girlfriend's life. I've witnessed it change Kevin, even the episode he just listened to today. The distinctions that you have in this arena are very profound. And I think it's an understanding, and it creates a perspective. Like, so much of what you said on this episode is like, I've never thought of that like that before, And I think a lot of people think they know about this arena, and I certainly thought I did in the past. And just be a student, and I suggest every listener listen to your show. It's really powerful. So keep it up.
I can't follow that up. You know what I mean? I can't follow that up. But no, I second it. I think that there's people who know and there's people who are. And I think you are it. You're a shining example. I appreciate the love that you gave us, but I think the world needs you just as much as the world needs us. And anything we can do to help you and support you, Pripo, you have two fans and friends and family now. So
thank you. I just love that, we're walking as human beings together, and that's what it's all about. I have a credential on my office door, those nameplates, and I have Pripo Teplitsky HB. I don't have MALM. I don't have that on my door. And HB to me is human being. That's what I bring when I'm with people, and that's what we need to do with each other. Some of us might be on different levels or paths and everything, but we're all just walking this. We're just doing what we can.
We are.
Powerful.
Well, we appreciate you. We'll let you walk on to I know you have an appointment coming up.
Got another, Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us, Pripo. Guys, follow this man. He is next level, and we appreciate you taking the time with us today, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much. If you ever need anything, please reach out.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, it would mean the world to us if you would share this with your friends.
And if you have any questions, please reach out to Kevin or myself. Our contact information is in the show notes, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Guys, we wouldn't be able to do this without you. So if you would kindly leave us a review on iTunes, that would help us make more people hyper-conscious.